Everyone was already seated when the chairman slid the folder across the table and said my name wrong. His voice echoed. People I had cooked for, smiled for, defended, stared at the grain like it was fascinating. My husband didn't look up. His mother cleared her throat. Someone coughed. The folder was thick. Divorce papers. A wire transfer amount highlighted in yellow. $1 million. Leave quietly. No statements, no delays. I felt heat behind my eyes but didn't blink. No one intervened. No one asked if I was okay. That was the moment I understood I was expendable. I married into that family young, before I understood how power rearranges love. At dinners, decisions were made before questions were asked. Smiles were currency. Silence was loyalty. My husband learned early how to disappear behind his surname. I learned how to adjust. When his affair surfaced, it wasn't shouted. It arrived through omissions. A missed call explained as business. A scent that didn't belong to our home. Then a photo leaked, quickly buried, then quietly confirmed. No one apologized. They asked for time, for patience, for understanding. I gave all three. His parents handled the crisis like an acquisition. Lawyers before conversations. Agreements before grief. I was invited to meetings, not discussions. When the twins were confirmed, the room shifted. I felt it physically. The future they wanted became urgent. I became inconvenient. They never blamed me directly. They talked about optics, timelines, transitions. About how long public memory lasts. About how women like me recover faster with resources. Someone said I was resilient. Someone else said I'd land on my feet. That's when the number appeared. 1 million, clean, conditional. My husband never argued the offer. That hurt more than the affair. He sat beside me, hands folded, eyes tired, like this was inevitable. He said he was sorry for the timing. He said his parents were under pressure. He said the children deserved stability. I asked where I fit. He didn't answer. Later he told me this would be easier if I cooperated. Easier for everyone. He avoided words like love and betrayal. He spoke in outcomes, in solutions, in exits. The agreement treated me like a variable to be removed. 7 days to leave. 3 years minimum before return. No interviews, no posts. No casual disclosures to friends. They offered help relocating as if exile were a courtesy. I nodded, I listened. I asked practical questions. Currency transfers, housing logistics, health coverage abroad. They relaxed when I stayed calm. They mistook composure for acceptance. Inside, something hardened. Not anger, clarity. I didn't tell anyone what happened next. Not my sister. Not my oldest friend. I went home and packed without ceremony. Clothes folded. Documents scanned. Photos left behind. At the airport, no one hugged me goodbye. A driver handed me an envelope and a phone number I would never use. On the plane, turbulence shook the cabin and my stomach turned. I assumed it was grief. I stared at the seatback and counted breaths. That's when the truth found me. I had been tired for weeks. Nauseous in the mornings. I blamed stress. When we landed, I went straight to a clinic because I needed certainty, not hope. The test took minutes. The result felt unreal, pregnant, quietly, early. I sat alone in a sterile room and laughed once, then stopped. The timing was cruel, also precise. I understood then why leaving felt necessary. Silence wasn't surrender. It was protection. I didn't change my decision. I signed the papers 2 days later. Not because I was weak, but because I was done begging for mercy from people who priced my absence. I kept the truth to myself. I let them believe they had solved a problem. As the wire cleared and the door closed behind me, I promised one thing. I would not be erased. I would move carefully. I would wait. They thought the story was finished. That money ends narratives. They didn't understand time, or bodies, or consequences. I boarded another flight with a smaller bag and a larger resolve. carrying something that would not stay silent forever, no matter how carefully they planned. The country I landed in didn't know me. That helped. No history. No whispered pity. Just a rental key, a short lease, and a city that kept moving without asking who I used to be. I chose a neighborhood where no one watched too closely. I learned the grocery aisles. I memorized the bus routes. I kept my head down and my voice even. Every morning, I woke before sunrise, not because I had to, but because silence felt safest then. Pregnancy changes time. Days stretch. Weeks blur. I tracked everything privately. Appointments under a different last name. Cash payments. No social media. No photographs. I told myself this wasn't secrecy. It was containment. I needed space to think without interference. I needed to understand what had happened to me beyond the headlines they controlled. Patterns reveal themselves when you stop defending them. I replayed the marriage without emotion, like footage. The way my needs were always postponed. The way decisions happened in rooms I wasn't invited into. The dinners where I was praised for being low maintenance. The jokes about how I didn't complicate things. I had worn those comments like badges. Now they sounded like warnings I ignored. Even the affair fit the pattern. It wasn't chaos. It was entitlement. He hadn't been reckless. He had been confident he'd be protected. When the truth surfaced, the machinery activated immediately. Damage control. Reputation management. I was never the priority. I was the obstacle. Once removed, everything aligned again. That realization hurt, but it also freed me from confusion. Nothing had gone wrong suddenly. It had always been wrong quietly. Money arrived in scheduled transfers, precise and impersonal. I moved most of it into accounts that earned interest and left it untouched. I found part-time remote work through a contact who didn't ask questions. The income was modest, but it was mine. I lacked earning something unconnected to silence. I lacked knowing I could function without them. My body changed steadily. I felt stronger some days, fragile others. I learned the rhythm of appointments, the small joys I didn't share with anyone. The first ultrasound. The sound I wasn't prepared for. I cried in the clinic bathroom, then washed my face and went home alone. I didn't call my husband. I didn't call his family. I didn't call anyone. Not because I was afraid. Because I was choosing. Occasionally, curiosity tried to intrude. I wondered if they were happy, if the wedding plans were underway, if anyone mentioned my name. Then I stopped. Wondering gave them space in my head they hadn't earned. I focused instead on building routines that didn't revolve around loss. Morning walks, simple meals, reading before bed. Stability became an act of resistance. At night, doubts crept in. Was I being unfair? Was I denying a future that could have been negotiated? Those questions passed when I remembered the meeting where the number was spoken. $1 million to disappear. No concern for my consent. No curiosity about my future. Only efficiency. That memory steadied me. I prepared documents quietly. Wills, guardianship preferences, medical directives. Not because I expected disaster, but because preparedness felt like control. I wasn't running anymore. I was organizing. I was thinking long-term, not emotionally. That shift mattered. Halfway through the pregnancy, a message arrived from an unfamiliar number. A brief check-in, polite, vague. I didn't respond. A week later, another message. This one carried concern. Still no response. Silence works when it's intentional. It forces others to confront their assumptions. They had assumed I would resurface, that I would negotiate, that I would need reassurance. They were wrong. I wasn't hiding. I was waiting, growing something that didn't require their approval. The story they told themselves depended on my absence remaining uncomplicated. They needed me gone, but not unpredictable. They didn't know that while they moved forward publicly, something irreversible was taking shape quietly. Not revenge. Not a plan. Just truth, accumulating weight. By the time they realized the silence wasn't temporary, It was already too late to control the outcome. The boundary finally broke in a quiet, deliberate way. Not a call, not a visit, a letter forwarded to the temporary address I had given only to immigration. Thick paper, formal tone, the kind of language people use when they believe politeness can erase history. They had found me, not by accident. By effort. The letter spoke of concern and responsibility, of family continuity, of how everyone makes mistakes and how time should soften things. There was no apology, no mention of exile, no recognition of the agreement they had enforced, just an assumption that silence meant availability, that distance meant permission. They wanted updates, medical information, due dates. They offered support without asking what kind I wanted. The words were careful, sanitized, but beneath them was something sharp, ownership, as if my body had been leased, not lived in, as if what grew inside me was already being counted. I read the letter twice. I folded it once. Then I placed it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. This was the line. Not the affair. Not the money. This, the attempt to step back into my life as if nothing had been broken. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the baby move. Not dramatically, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone. I placed my hand there and breathed until the shaking stopped. I understood something then. Silence had protected me until now. But silence was no longer enough. I contacted a lawyer the next morning. Not to fight, to define, to document, to make the invisible visible. The meeting was calm, practical. She asked questions without judgment. She explained jurisdiction, custody, rights. She told me what I already sensed. Nothing could be taken without my consent. Still, the pressure escalated. Emails followed. Polite reminders. Requests framed as care. Each one carried the same message. They were ready to answer themselves, to manage, to negotiate, to decide what was best. I stopped responding. Instead, I focused inward. On routine, on stability, on building something quiet and real. I changed doctors. I changed numbers. I stopped using my married name. Each change was small, but together they formed a wall. Not aggressive, firm. The final boundary crossing came through someone else. A mutual acquaintance reached out, casually mentioning that the family was worried, that they feared I was being influenced, that they were considering legal options if cooperation wasn't possible. The message was delivered gently. The intent was not. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat in silence, long enough for the truth to settle. They had mistaken restraint for weakness, distance for compliance. My quiet had been read as waiting. It wasn't. That evening, I drafted a single response through counsel. No emotion, no accusation, just facts. No contact without representation, no access without agreement, no decisions without consent. It was sent once. There was no follow-up. After that, something shifted. The noise stopped. Not because they accepted it, because they had reached a wall they couldn't bypass without exposing themselves. I felt it in my body before I understood it intellectually. The begging stopped. Not outwardly, internally. For the first time, I wasn't hoping to be chosen. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't bracing for their reaction. I was simply moving forward, quietly, completely. By the time they reached out again, my life no longer fit into the shape they remembered. I was living quietly in a city where no one knew my name or my history. I had a small apartment with light that came in every morning. I worked, I rested, I prepared. My days were slow and deliberate. I kept my phone on silent most of the time. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need noise anymore. The message came through an attorney, polite, careful. They wanted to check in. They wanted to confirm the terms we had agreed on. They wanted reassurance that I was still gone, still compliant, still erased. I read it once, then closed my laptop. I didn't respond. What they didn't understand was that silence had stopped being something they controlled. It was mine now. Their plans began to fracture without my involvement. The wedding was delayed. Questions started to surface. Documents didn't align the way they were supposed to. Dates conflicted. Stories shifted. When people tried to trace timelines, they found gaps where I used to be. Gaps that raised quiet concerns. No one accused anyone of anything. Not yet, but discomfort spread. Investors asked for clarification. Family friends stopped returning calls as quickly. Reputation, once polished and protected, began to dull at the edges months later. My former husband sent an email himself. It was shorter than I expected. Less confident. He asked how I was doing. He said he hoped I was well. He didn't mention the money. He didn't mention the past. He didn't mention the future he had replaced me with. I read it without emotion. Then I deleted it. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They arrived through paperwork, through audits, through legal questions that required sworn answers, through people who suddenly needed distance, through silence that no amount of money could fix. I didn't watch closely. I didn't need to. I trusted the systems they once relied on to protect them. I focused on what was in front of me. My body changing. My strength returning. My sense of self becoming solid again. I built a routine that didn't depend on anyone's approval. I chose a name for my child that belonged only to us. I learned how to live without explaining myself. One afternoon, I received a final notice. The trust they had used to pay me was under review. Not because of me, because of how it had been used. Because of how often it had been used to make problems disappear. My name appeared once in the file, as a transaction, as an exit, as a mistake they would never be able to correct. I felt nothing when I read it. No triumph, no relief. Just confirmation. I never went back. I never corrected their assumptions. I never revealed what I carried away with me. Not the pregnancy, not the truth, not the strength they underestimated. I let them believe I was exactly what they paid for. A clean ending. What they never understood was that they didn't buy my silence. They taught me how powerful it could be. Today, my life is quiet in a way that feels earned. There is no audience, no explanation, just forward movement. I didn't win by fighting. One didn't survive by being loud. I simply stepped out of the story they wrote for me and let reality finish the rest, and it did.